Hey guys, how's it going? So I want to just get some good uh audio actually. I've already started the broadcast. Great. Am I okay? So we haven't gotten that done. Anyways, I'll just figure out how we have this thing. I'm gonna try to stay on track here. Um we have this. How's it going, guys? We have this. It's 214 Paraconomy Inc. We have this thing going on, this conversation about humanities and how we've accessed parts of our frontal lobe and like are strobing in and out of consciousness. So I go ahead and like hit the brain thinner here on some like experimental kind of hypotheses on how some of the brain chemistry, the endothermic like enigmatic technicians kind of have happen on Ong. On my why my Ong is getting pressured as this weird stoicism in our dream trickle realities. So take me back to a few decade like a last decade. I had this part on enigmatic technician that felt more like a Sepsis or Xerxes, and it was actually more intrepid and like basically it takes Sepsis to Xerxes like Neptune like Zedekoff like kind of thing where its conjuncture ends up backwards on this part and it goes north or like this is this kind of like eastern like northeastern thing on the globe, and then this is where like you kind of end up with certain parts of this is the genealogy, some of the genealogy, uh, but like that's how you kind of flourish out some of this genealogy and the different profilings. Historically there's this arc what did the guy say? Archimedes, fielding basically on depth, where or homegirl, yeah, whoever, shout out whoever said that, um, yeah, but like basically where you might find that, and if we're looking for an alleviation on this part on like alien talks, so with our understanding of humanities and how like concave the skull has become, it's hollowed out for like this part in aerodynamics and thermoendodynamics, to where the studies of the skull have like looked into the temporal parts on enigmatic technician. So if you can seize light basically, and you can like ride the virtue of light back and forth between the portaling in your enigmatic chakral, it gives you this huge magnification on like this pretentious part on like cosmic consciousness, and it adds to this this part of alien technician, where it no longer hits this intrepid part and this tepid like kind of tide pool thing, and you start to get radio signal basically from off world that hits this part of this first concave here on what like you might see with other skulls on this planet, but like it's less of a dip, and it causes this like basically new next level bumping on genealogy, which gives it which you don't have that on this planet like unless it's got this balancing on peptides and like uppers basically, and it gives this part of the skull before you're born like at chance of risk and while you're over your lifespan of developing. They've found that like evolutionarily like the chain of events for humans, the evolutionary line on like enigmatic technician gives this concave bump on people's human like construct, and it grabs like forward at this, especially for monks, and when you're like meditating and a lot of different cultures. Like I like to pull from like my people. It's easy for me to like talk about like there are so many different things, and especially if it's very vast and rich with that in Africa and stuff. So that side of the globe, the magnetism has had that thing going on. And if we're basing our understanding of old humans and new humans on this planet, then we might have a flavor for creating new humans over here in America. And that's kind of where, like, we don't know exactly every odds and ends that we've been established here. Um, and while that's been played, because the genetics programs from the from and this has been forever on in this country, but like yeah, mostly from that side end up with this thing going on, and they have things going on with what we can maybe assume to be the Nordics or something going on across from like anything past like Egypt, because like that's another again magnetism ended up giving people a bigger piece of the pie here. So when you're based out of a certain layaway on frequency response and shamans tessellate your enigmatic to the stars back against to like the mothering and fathering, and then like kind of giving it off to the village in a sense. It created this portaling on what we knew could become of potentially for people. So when you become a shaman in certain cultures, it meant prophecies would also take the devil's lane basically away from its own like vanity and then place it towards constructive actual like stoicism. So instead of it being like this pointy like demon thing, evil becomes this like layaway wasteland of beauty and nature and stuff like that. So that's one big way people stopped giving enigmatic technician on their lower root chakrals in certain places for long enough. They'd find out that, like, dude, people would be evolving stuff, which is why in like the Aztecs and like pyramid and places in India, places where there's pyramids, you find more of the enigmatic chakral balancing where I have looked into since I was like there was this program called Rave EJ. I don't think I'd be here today if I didn't have like this thing going on for me. And like trying to put my tiki culture somewhere on like this stone stuff. And that's where like humanity has this pull on whatever this stone masonry also has archaically speaking. But yeah, your human brain has your average human has telepathy and radio waves, and those can be added and subtracted from the picture and stuff like that. So when people are born on this planet at the right time, they're given this legacy and breakthrough on enigmatic technician that can be it gets them killed off quicker, like extension or something, like a celebrity, because you're not really supposed to know that there's like royalty on this planet still, but it starts to form and hide itself away in it's real cheeky, but there's a second chance in the roll of the dice for certain parts of enigmatic technician that give you a new Zepsies or something along those lines, and you can take a free ticket and ride out of this atmosphere and like basically end up back in like your own body, but it's like not it's not. the same. And it's kind of like you've died. You've become this part in the like the galaxy. And most people get this when they're dreaming. But like something gives me an understanding here that like if you have heightened senses of awareness, that your lucidity also gains like friction to increase this part of human evolution. So if you're gaining substance on how people want to incorporate certain layaways in humanity for gifts on like moments of truth for their own genealogy, that gives them the importance on whether or not they have a lick of it or a chance to survive on this planet. Um, because like if it puts them on and it gives this part meaning, it dictates on this forefrontal lobe action on consciousness, which doing and providing also like kind of because it's like it's almost a servitude, but human beings and aliens have been known, and there are lots of really good theories about humans and aliens on this planet having a slave master relationship. And we're like literally designed to like have something that feels like we can get out of a situation, evolutionarily speaking. So like if you needed to, you can't just like form wings and fly, but like if you needed to, your body like senses that like facet in nature and like it sort of emulates the feeling. Um and it has something to do with this part in our DNA and how it tucks away certain royalties in our DNA for certain people, and they're also somehow born on certain days of the calendar, and it gets people interested in their roles on this planet at some point or another if they're so willing to unbox and uncover and dig up what there is available for them on this planet for who they are and how they are or whatever it is, and it gives them this dice roll on per chance on Duchess, and that's like basically you're in on enigmatic for royalties, and it basically shuffles the deck around here, and it gives you this spades on but it's like a full it's a flush. It's more like a family suit, but it's like a flush of this part, and it's supposed to have, as far as like it's from what I understand on what these aliens did to me for the Buddhism versus what they did to me for my through my English channel. Because if I'm like also like Xerxes Neptune, like kind of Anglo-Saxon white, and I've got this like more Caucasus Mountains, like Anglo-Saxon thing going on, but it's not just because of my skin or my fortitude, but it's like this like of the like part of that, then like you're sticking to things, if that makes sense. And like how you're supposed to like kind of move through life over on that side of the world. And so like once that happens over here, Africa, Middle East, Asia, Mexico, all over the globe, um, we have these things where like this gives us this palading for how to like placate and stage our own human enigmatic subjective natures to both one another and this like kind of like the spiritual thing, which is why like humans kind of give meaning to spirituality in places where they have nothing basically, but they know there's something up taking that space up in front of them, and it's might as well be alive for all intents and purposes. And that's kind of what people are starting to like facet here is that aliens aren't going to be this like green dude hanging out. They're here. Um, and for and it might freak people out because they might start to manifest that way, especially the longer we stay in this part of the Milky Way where we've been placed, basically. And we'll be here safely for millions of eons, dude. Freaking a long, long time. But like there could be this part where we turn our planet into a spaceship and we would like deal with the dozens on like the galaxy and just kind of send her off into this part. And back to this I was just talking about a multiplicity on how staggered this thing has become on multiple realities where frame rate broke off towards the left and a couple of set of humans broke off onto that and then like also frame rate onto the right. Humanity decided to like take the like helm on conjuncture. So stoic athleticism and alcoholism became like a battle for wits almost, if you want to look at it. And now we're going through this thing where we're trying to prune family history, and that's where people are starting to try to utilize history as a political agenda against their birthrights and certification. Because if you ain't pimping, you ain't simping, then you finna be gimping. And that kind of like maybe like have the reason why. Um, at the end of the day, when you have these experiences with aliens here on our planet, like I've had, this gives you this wiggle room here where it doesn't feel real, and like you can like walk away from it, knowing that it's have its ins and outs with you. You get past getting friendly with it because it's straight up demony stuff available within and out of this contextual, and this is why people are like fan it out, clear out the air. There's literally like micron like sized like particles that can blanket out some of these like hive mind and become this like in Futurama where there's like that galaxy talking to Bender, but like not at a huge level. These things exist in pockets in our atmosphere too, at like different sizes. And that's I think something that people are starting to repeat is this part of the phenomenon is these pockets in reality for people. Um, and when you can see them and access them, it gives you this like way to seamlessly draw away from your timeline into this alternate like multiplicity here where you can then function and facet parts of your this part that breaks off on the left that fuels and feels like it does something else for a while, and we put it over there as useless, but it does stuff. And then it's just it can take an eye for it, and it's this bigger pluming for these things with this right thing. It keeps people drawn into like this magnetism stuff, and it gives people this weird way to just like nope, not going anywhere, like stuck to this part in this gravitational force here on our planet. And it's how we've learned to like this is where people might need to figure out how to free themselves from like objectification, because if we've like sort of grasp into this next part of humanity where we're like freely in and out of our body, and it's something we can kind of have access to because we're searching for that chain of evolutionary caustic evaluation that gives us things like telekinesis or levitation or zero gravity. And it's like it's just like a weird experience in time that you just like wait for the right moment, and like if you catch it, you evolve into this pocket of like achievement and like success in humanity, which is like the weird give and take on what if we're here to serve a function on this planet, and we've been gifted these some of these tools that go under the bar or the radar or the table officially, but we end up with it here on all the other like suds and duds that give us some of the spuds here. Yeah, forgive my rhyming, but like if it gives us this part where you end up with like pearly stuff. And you're getting this like golden, like rose gold pearl stuff that's like enigmatic rainbow, like sort of warmer stuff, but it's like this, it's iridescent. It's this very like iridescent kind of like, and it's like has this like almost this like this like slimy watery thing going on where like humans have this like kind of fluid experience over their enigmatic like basically this part of the pineal where it dips down, and it gives you this part right about where your medusa might be, and it sings, it kind of sings to you outside of your like your opticals. And that's how they knew certain people in the village were going to be better as like doctors or seers or things like that. Is this and when we can recognize this in human beings, it gives us this next level part of like satellite like triggering response where you get to have a signal like convert back. It's like having a cup of tea with these aliens, and they like kind of like, oh, how was your day? It's like, oh, good. Your day's going good. Yeah, my day's going great. So there's this thing going on where we blah 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 blah, and it like kind of trades off on how human beings have like basically been able to alleviate and escape parts of our reality on this planet. And it could be this, we could unfortunately, but also fortunately, it could be seeing parts of this like play out, and it's causing people to experience um the planet in different ways, which is why we might be having hard like these growing pains here in humanity, because people didn't get their go ahead when they were supposed to. So if look back to my like kind of thing, I don't love to go through it, but if there's like plagues of like happening to these like like races of crypto intelligence here, and it's like it feels like this kind of halo thing going on where you but you have this stuff, and like it gives you that your synapse response has this key in, and you can picture it, and it sticks like photograph, and you have this photographic like uh, response now that gives you the experience anytime. And so like once humanity's evolved at this level of like muscle like retention, you can then basically go from the that to just simply like that. Like it's as it goes right. Instead of taxing the entire thing, it makes it a seamless move, and you and then it's gone basically, and it becomes a part of the memory. And so whenever that needs to be triggered from this part outside of your experience, it somehow has this EMF pull on, much like how you're biohacking from the inside, but the outside. And I mean, your skin's an organ. So like, and we're carbon based. Okay, these things must be like, I mean, there's some pretty good science on this stuff, but like that's kind of where maybe my ticket's blown, because like I know there's like a good more hunk of this stuff that's happening in electrolysis, and why like our collagen can basically be like back to like youthful readiness with like light enhancement and stuff like that. So anything's possible on these days, and like that's kind of where I'm seeing this part where humanity's able to have more without and they're doing less, right? And then this other part of humanity's doing less with more, sort of like comparison on like what's happening in evolution, which is giving people new opportunities because are basically waiting their turn, or they're manipulating and competing for the turn. And that could be like how we got to some of this at all, is that this limited experience in our humanity, and even with like kinship and like brotherhooding, like in Greek fraternities in Greece and stuff like that, they measured the moon and like the planets and stuff like that. So like that could be like how where when I got my experience with some of this, it left this thing off onto me, and it feels away. It like hurts my feelings. But it like, it's basically like it, it's hard to explain, because it's this like it's alien, okay? And like it's difficult to put onto the table, but like until I did mushrooms, I had very little clue that this thing could be like so, dude, my first mushroom trip, I was scarred. Um, I was like kind of like seeing like religious trauma. Okay, I had some very visceral and cerebral religious trauma, and it scared the living daylights out of me. I don't think I've had demons bigger that I've had to battle in my entire life. And that's kind of why I think it's fine. Whatever these bozos got ripped up out of the grave and like back and forth, then it gave life and purpose to parts that like I'd experience with like other friends. So if it gets more intimate than just like cargo space, but it's like this next level like kind of intersectionality, and you're given this kind of area to like bend space time in, but it doesn't give you the right access if you can't afford it to. Next weird thing, we wouldn't be here if I wasn't able to afford it the first time, I wouldn't have proof that I'm worth putting somewhere at the level of being balanced in towards. If humanity is testing me and I'm on the world stage on like Illuminatic judgment and fortitude, and they're like, "Hey, Buddha, you're actually built. You've done it. You already did the hard part. It was like way back there, bro. And you just like have a Cinderella life on some stuff. But like they see you, and like that dropped you off here, and then you have these. This is where you get like you end up with aliens instead of like the other way around. Alien, and well, kind of. like my that's I said that weird. So like between me and my family, I end up with the aliens. They end up with like reality. So like that's that was kind of the trade-off here. But it seems like working with this thing has helped teach at least my sister how to teach my parents about some of this stuff that I've kind of unleashed, and we have had to patent here and like maintain some of that lippiness here for people to understand that they can't be playing with some of my stuff if they haven't been given the consent here between what I brought back to this planet that is alien and how long that has been sitting and waiting for me to come up and grab it for free because it's the first and last. And that's kind of like the weird part is like somebody else said, "Hey, I know what this is all the time." And like if I didn't get but it's slightly different. People had their eyes on that. So that's kind of why they knew to take my crown. And they're like, we need that crown because now I see how big it is. It's much bigger. And like, that's why that's why I also kept a lid on some things. I was like, look, I went to this school and I found some things out, and I've had aliens visit me. So for the past like 10 years, while people have been doubting me, I've been kind of like, okay, next level, like keep going. And I've been getting through to some weird parts, which is why I'm kind of a boss in the dream realm. And it's a weird part of like our world, um, and it gives people this little bit on like how everything has a choice in the fact of the matter on gravitational expertise and how your body reacts in time basically says more about what's happening in the moment and how that like imprints itself along reality. And excuse me, I'm going on a tangent here. This affects time space daily. Excuse me. So that's kind of one thing when things larger than our planet and our sun even are like just chilling. Um, there are suns pretty big, but there are suns that are much larger than ours. And so, what's to say there's not life that also doesn't act that way? And like like I back to this pocket-sized like Rick and Morty dream, like the cloud that's alive and functioning. These things can be like real dense. Much like kind of like the flood, and go back to Halo, kind of like how the flood or the Borg or any weird, maybe not the Borgs, well, kind of, um, but like. That could be go ahead, pick your poison. It's the force. It's midichlorians, right? So like that maybe that's what's going on. Uh that's kind of where you guys have this part to argue about because that's what it is too. If you're nerdy enough, it's right there at the spark of our like humanity, and it's where you can actually see reality unfold before it happens. And that's how humanity has basically been able to teleport in and out of this angle through this caustic event reality basically portaling. And if you give it this enigmatic technician that you're born with, it will like it'll send you off into your like divine the rest of your kind of while you're in that participation with it. So if you're participating with the reality, it it pulls from that and articulates your special gifts um and you're basically given this like portaling and playing through, which is why we need to look at why like we might want to like reduce or just like pressure out and figure out how to deal with war and peace on this planet. Because if we can just send people through this stuff, we kind of grow up past the need for certain things on this planet, and that would get people to care more and focus more on their well-being in their lives and stuff. So humanity's got to figure out this friction on human and social evolution and scientific development if we're ever going to place marginalized like leisure onto these pretentious like existences that don't have a home yet. So like it's an experience waiting to be lived. But like if it's hard for you to get to it, and that's kind of a third that becomes our first world problems to a third world and a global problem because like if look, we're even placed at the front and we still don't get it, there's more to it then. And maybe patience needs to be, but like it's kind of here to stay, and it discourages certain like boundaries. It's as it replicates yours, and it'll push you back. It'll change your past, just about, and if not for like for real. And that's kind of where if I mean there are instances, and I'm sure we can look at and plug these guys here to the stars, where there's people who get abducted by have the alien abductees, and then they're have amnesia, like that, like later on in life, or like it's just like for like weeks after, for days or hours even. Like there's people who are in and out of like, where'd you go? I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, this it's kind of it could have something to do with like these pockets in time space where we're busy playing with life, and like the world like around that and you. And that's kind of where as long as you sit with those, they give, they reciprocate. And so like that's the weird part of like pushing through these non-human experiences to evolve and give yourself like that difference in comparing what is worth evolving in humanity and like what has and hasn't happened yet. Um, because we won't know what's worth evolving yet until certain things play out in humanity, which is why if there's a big map and people have access to it, they're watching that kind of like a bed of mycelium have this part where it's starting to like grow through into people's like enigmatic. So like you give this alien life, especially when it comes to these concaves and this telepathy and wavelength articulation for our skulls, that you have a presence, and it like it basically has more to it than what you're able to see initially, which is like kind of the weird like part of why it it feels alien, or it takes the place of something that we can't explain. And that's kind of where people and that's where if there I mean now I've never seen any of the stuff these guys are taught. This guy, this book, I've never seen anything quite like this one. And this one's a great. Good, go grab these ones. because this is a triple, but this one's really cool because and I'm gonna need a few more here because it looks like David Greer just came out with one. Um, and yeah, there's just plenty of political figures here now that can back up some of what I'm saying here today. Uh, wouldn't have as much if we didn't also have then the right people taking words from out of there to here. So, it's gonna take time for people to be like, that guy was always crazy. Alien guy, that guy's crazy. Hippie doodah day guy, crazy. Academic scholar, and that's gonna freak that's always been flipping people out. But that's like the day and night to like this part of how in humanity people are gonna, especially if you've gone through the dance, you have tattoos, you're covered in tribal culture, you're gonna have this part, and this is where people got tripped up over me and which culture I'm divided over because no one's claiming me as a Hawaiian except for me. Because believe it or not, there aren't very many of us out here. Not, and whenever I get with Asians, it's not quite the same. So like that's kind of always been something I'm like solo, okay, out here, until like for miles, basically. Michigan's away. But like, yeah, that's kind of why maybe my sister enjoys living out west. There's plenty of Asian people and Mexican, brown people all over the place over there. And like maybe I'm missing those things is like the patterns that get mixed up, but and that's why I'm getting claimed by like other things in this, which why it also fits and as a substitute is because I'm like really into this part that gives this part a sort of a thing. That's where maybe I'm getting put in on the Latinx community that gives that this little bit all the time. But that's not exactly where it is supposed to be. And so now I'm part of I look and I feel like the Latinx community before I ever fit in with frickin' Aloha. And that's simply because this is the mainland too, weirdly enough. So if those aliens are looking for a volcano, they're gonna have to look pretty dang hard here in the Midwest. But that's not to say that these rolling hills don't have freaking lids on them. I'm pretty sure, and it's been confirmed here on Doop Doop with some of you guys that we have lava chains here in Michigan. We have in places where it's flat in like Idaho. I'm sure there's something going on, and that's maybe where like humanity has another checkpoint going on, and we're actually accessing parts underground, right? Even uh, that could be like kind of reasonable, and if that's interacting with people too, because we found out that let's just say we found out, and like no going back, um, yeah. That's kind of where though the if look, I'm off planet with some of these things, but I'm like rooted in humanity still. Like somehow, even though if I exist as a non-human, I somehow get reestablished here and replanted back in, which is it's a bizarre way to be. But like, this is kind of something that humanity has with historically with figures and that have this part. I mean, Nikola Tesla kind of fits that role. with like the Plato, like Socrates cave stuff. Um, but like, this part, and even with Elon has some neat stuff now that since then he's gotten he from him and he's sold off his, and they have science that does some weird stuff now, and he must know about the aliens. He's going to space, so like that's kind of where it makes you kind of look at potentially if like shout out Tom DeLonge and Elon and how everybody and my dad knows. How does my dad know Donald Trump and Elon? Yeah, good question. Well, like, your friends got to the bag before you did. And maybe that's the lesson you get to teach everybody is like your life is, and everybody's life is like that too. But like, if you're, like I said, it goes back to this part where you're divinely guided to take your turn in humanity, and like that's what I've been given here a little bit is you made your choice, right? Around the people you love, by the people you love, and they couldn't have been bothered with you. And they were just showing off of how much better they off they were without you doing things with your weed and your modeling, and they get jealous, right? Okay. Pretentiousness it supersedes itself here in access, and why people with this gift in humanity that you might look at as hippie or liberal gave birth to our military, um, and our servicemen's like codes on how to live in leisure, modern day facilitation on what peace, tranquility, serenity, all these things are supposed to feel like in the hands of a gifted, like free, basically pioneer in America, because everything is very clandestine, and we have these like hopes and dreams that that we kind of have this fortitude for, but that could be a gift, um, and like if we're learning how to work with it, that is like the weird that's time. It's the weird part in humanity that nobody likes to wait around on. It's the snowy winter that everybody's inside with. It's time. And it ticks by as you go. And that's where things start to articulate and the ticking blurs into like smoothing, and it's no longer, and you perceive the rate at things that experience moves in time versus how other people may have anticipated the movement of flow in time. So this could also mean people have different the reason Mexicans are back to get to racist me, but I mean this is stereotyping. If Hawaiians are lazy, okay, if Hawaiians are lazy, oh, what's to say that like that stereotype? And use myself. What's to say that isn't that stereotype doesn't facilitate the means for recognition on a Hawaiian, knowing that time's only gonna take this much since you've been your people get it. And that's why you're kind of gifted this thing, and it's supposed to be like given to this like kind of in and out of your next passion, and it articulates itself and exists outside of itself before it knows it's there, which is why dreams kind of articulate what isn't there, but like how we can navigate through and around it or under or above it, and like kind of get a feeling for the choosing of like percentage aware, like well-rounded awareness on like your choice in the fact of the matter, excuse me. So like if it gives startled me here, freaking bumping up into things. If this gives you this like edge in humanity, basically, it kind of gives us a periscope on enigmatic technicians for future, especially if you're looking to start families and stuff, which hit me up. I'm single here, looking for a little settle down here for a second. We'll see. Um, yeah, get you a good one, and it'll just like help you out. And that's like kind of the next part of the like luxury on humanity is once you get a family, you settle down and raise a family, but then there's like new things to worry about. Then they've learned how to like squeeze people like me out, Uncle Sam, being like, well, the kid rock's too rowdy around the kids and doesn't seem to be doing anything in the family, so let's kick him out of the family. And you're like, hey, what's going on? I'm just partying, banging so many girls. Right. If you didn't settle and you don't plan on settling down in the family, it gets people kind of a sign on how that part of the gene pool could weigh out if if it feels like they're not taking this seriously. But if they've taken this seriously and people called them crazy forever, and then it turns out they're not crazy, that's kind of like the phenomenon of like who are you? Like at the other end of it, because it's like, no, you didn't come up with all of that. It's like, yeah, I did. I started all the way back in like 2011, and people didn't recognize me afterwards. So that's kind of why it took a long time for me to process what I'd been thrown to, because that's a long time ago. Again, over what 2011. It's over 10 years ago now. I'm putting it, trying to put it back way further. And that's maybe where the Buddhism stuff comes in. And I do get a little bit in and out as I'm growing up. But once I'm an adult, boom, reality, it checks and slams me. I get grounded and floored out there in a lot of weird ways. Not completely, but like it's not very fun where I'm at because I'm hanging on to this by a thread. And that's where people are like, ooh, okay, I don't want to screw you up. It's nice to meet you. Right. And it's like, what did that person just see about me that I don't see? And that's also this part. They know that people can profile you. And especially if you feel like you give off the profile of some old haggard yakuza, what up? It may look like it, and like yeah, that's you're willing to dance around the art. You probably have no means to geisha me out, but like that could be like why we're going through any of this is like I first saw the sepsis and nepotism on Lakeside and Nepsies and Lakeseas on your enigmatic shot partition, right? Um, and it gives you your Nebuchadnezzar kind of field of vision where you're given this kind of anecdotal, like pretentious, basically partitioner between what's that one even about? I don't even fully remember, but you go to that part of the Bible and it's written out on the behavioralism and it teaches the like stone and the vine of like your planting like how your family might look generationally if you were to fulfill a certain thing that's possible. And that's like the only way they had to record it back in the day where anthropological cults and things like that could use as a partitioner to to articulate humanity. And that's like a huge part that people don't probably understand about Christianity today is like it's been bastardized and railroaded to be utilized as a demagogue, much like a mosque or something like that. And that's kind of why we also practice in partitioner strength along wavelengths to on on like Muslim cultures and stuff like that in Christianity in America in order to partition the enigmatic in both the militarized and like the homeland. So like while you get the play from the actual drift and the journey, whatever lands up back here colloquially as a culture becomes staple in behavioralism. So when we went out for 9/11, that brought a lot of people back here with something to chew on for a little bit of a different. I got a real nice seat on with people there. That college that I went to is really nice, but like something tells me Michigan's got some good stuff. I don't even really, I'm just getting my nose into any of it. And that's kind of maybe why it has happened here. The happening, the puppeting here is going on. And now that I've done that, and I did that as a guy, it opened up this thing here where I did mushrooms later on in college, and it opened up the partitioner to like, hey, freedom ain't free, but like, come on and grab you some. There is plenty to go around in spirituality, and that led me down some like vanity back. It led it eventually leads me down to play with it. But that's not before this enigmatic technician becomes this like really nice freaking massage in my life. And I take Molly for the first time and I'm like sitting and existing in this like baptismal thing after this shroom trip that I took. And like I sat around this volcano and I was like wizard flipping the next day. But I like so like the night before I took mushrooms, and I had this like vision with my family on how my grandparents were gonna die, and I was like trying to like write a song, and I ended up like getting to this part, and I was all alone. Um, and then I launch out, and then the next day I go to the music festival. I like pop a Molly, and then like I start to like have a great day. I like come back. It was a 3-day festival too, so I think I got the weekend. And like I like was just like having this thing going on because I'd never really been a part. I've always wanted to be a part of the Molly scene like that in the freaking rave culture and stuff from like what the 90s felt like they were supposed to be when the alien niche stuff used to be like Men in Black first started coming out for the first time in the 90s, and it was there with like Jacko and stuff like Michael Jackson getting his like freaking face like in an American and Gwen Bat Boy and stuff like that where it starts to bleed over this fictitious part, and it gives people this like weird thing in Hollywood for a while because it unearths some really messed up stuff. And I think that's this back to this evil thing where it morphs between whatever this thing is for humanity and uh, having it variably sit on our like expeditious like domain over society at the time because nothing had played out quite yet until like the late 2000s, mid to early and then early 2000s, where you're sitting a little bit um, on some of it and it starts to disappear. almost overnight as we start, and it turns into this next thing where you end up with 9/11, and humanity's kind of gaining this weird thing behind the veil on like human like development, and then before you know it, we're finding out more stuff about humanity that we didn't even know possible. And iPhones are coming out, but like it's because there's this whole thing in the military complex that supersedes itself, and this enigmatic technician gives this part of the dream machine thing going on. There's this dream machine stuff that they unlock by channeling and they found out through a lot of clandestine chemists, like on freaking Hamilton Pharmacopoeia, that you could dial in dreams, and they have figured out how to give you directionality in ways throughout into other different places and experiences where humanity like doesn't even take the form of its former like shell. You and experiences that people have like gifted off as like, dude, what? Some people are like, take me back there, but some people are like, what did you do with all of this stuff? This has me concerned. And it's that part of humanity. Oh, it's a theory of string line theory of humanity along several different multiplicities of realities in forefronts on a planetary divide through this part of the cosmos. And this is what gave me this enigmatic technician through levitation, and how I was able to give this next level part of this in and out. It's why I keep diminishing people's like pipe down, because this part is seems to be like a huge way away. It's a far breakaway from a lot of things that we knew to be true back there just 20 years ago. And now here we are, and it's eating at us in some ways. And this technology in the new AI has been able to test out our dreams. And so, like, the dreams are then also a place where humanity archaically redesigns itself as an echo in some sort of patterning through our genetics and this like wavelength existence. So when you're tapped into the consistency of all of a sudden you found out where time's supposed to move differently, and then you're like, oh, I'm here on the other end of that existence. And so like that's how it can trigger off other events in reality. And that's kind of possibly how I ended up with this part of Buddhism over this part of the country folk who that my family on my mom's side comes from, and the island folk who my dad's comes from have this thing now where it didn't always have, and now it's redirects enigmatic technician towards the direct line of study that I've been able to like pass through, because for whatever reason I can bring it back with me. Not everybody can, but like for whatever reason, sometimes this thing comes back with a vengeance, and it blows up the surface area on conjecture on what we knew to be true about generalized like tension and existence. So this like I've been through this thing, and it's really demony. This is why I'm like, hey, whatever you guys got going on, but like whatever this thing is, I've been through this thing alive. Um, and it's something a lot of people like wait their whole lives to go through. And people know what this is too now. because people have been doing a lot of hallucinogens over the past 20 years. And that's opened up a lot for this conversation on how people have been past life, the threshold of life and death, and saw through this enigmatic technician in the waking life and the dream spirituality that gives you this thing where you can look at events as they're happening before they happen, which is why we're kind of having some of these arguments. Some people are built for these discoveries, it seems like, and some people are built for these discoveries. And people have shifted on where to put the weight of importance in humanity, knowing that you have more luxury in the directionality. So back to magnetism, there's a North Pole and a South Pole going on. And that gives people this balance where some people are, they know when the planet's going to revolve around them basically, and it feels it, and you can tell, and there's a tell, and you know, and it's there, and it acts, and it feels, and it sinks, and you know. Okay, and then you articulate it. And this part I keep messing up almost, because like there's so many people on this planet. It's hard for people to like slow down and stop and observe some of the tinkering that people are actually all playing a part in. And and science dictates this part has more applicatory finesse. It has more friction to teeth. So it's not just like creating a abrasive. It's it's teething this thing. So this is like how like our this is could be a big indication that we're like and the Mayans and stuff, we're too far from the sun, or like the moon's too close to our earth, or different things like that. And it would be like, oh, we've got to make sure these things happen in world, or we'll crash the planet straight into nowhere, and more like Nepsies, or like Xerxes, or something, some other Zulu like Nefarian thing. You get that stuff going on, and you get this stuff where it balances tide break waves over like our like we did it in humanity, which is why we can go to war. So like that's kind of one big reason is like people are like, yes, we've finally done it. Like humanity comes to these agreements that subtleties have been amazed and observed, and like given the awe-inspiring hope that there's this like interesting event horizon that can be achieved when multiple people have this sort of enigmatic technician magnified beyond this, but like also it can aperture back forward to this more direct individual thing where you're just like a force to be reckoned with. So like if reality just also has a spotlight on our key players like this, like back to extension, XXX Tentacion guy. Um, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. Cool freaking tell. But yeah, or even like, yeah, you might even crawl into the other pseudo famous cloud rappers. Because there was this that at the time too. Um, and current, and why it became big is because this stuff started happening to people like us, like him, me, my friends over there, these kids over here, and it started happening to people, and we all started waking up to it, and we just called it what it was. It was a piece of the pie, but it wasn't the full enigmatic spectrum that everybody has been able to kind of have a touch and play with, which is why it's this keep away right now. um, is some people know more about how this was supposed to play out because they get to. Um, it's not even sometimes it's an age thing, but sometimes it's not because like clearly my parents are missing out, but like my sister gets it, you know? So like that's kind of and my cousins get it. So like that could be like where my parents now do get it, but that's a lot further down the line. So if we're looking at evolution and we're like saying, "Oh, but he gets it at 36. These guys didn't get it till their 50s." Then you're like, how far did the apple fall from the tree? Because like you're supposed to have waited, but you already got that one snuck in. Wait, how did you retire so early? And then you start realizing how old your soul is and that you've died on the inside so many times. It's sad. You've sacrificed enough of your you on the inside, you've died so many times. And this seems to be a parallel to like even when I used to get bloody noses when I was a kid, even more so because I had uncontrollable bloody noses when I was a kid and like kind of stopped eventually. My septum grew whatever it was supposed to grow. And like I have then on had less of that thing going on where and it's developed into a more structure. There's structure to this free flow part of where before I had dreams when I had bloody noses, they felt a little more like cosmic or like dizzying and a lot more spinning, but I could handle it at the time. I was a lot smaller, but as I like developed it, something got built compartmentalized in wherever that overproduction of capillaries in my sinuses produced, and it gives this part and my dreams are also now different. And so, and then on top of that, I've had my septum pierced, which did another thing. So like that's kind of possibly one big reason is that people have been trying, scarification, like like stretching my ears and stuff like that. I jumped through some hoops that I probably I probably should have had some like explanations or like just padded out a little bit better so people could put me where I deserve to be. And that's where people need to find out a baseline of where magnetism will find them. Because if you know how easy it is and you know how hard it is, you should be able to give people that. And that's what I've been doing basically for free for like way, way too long. And so now I've got into this part of expert mode and it's no longer like that. So like I can't do it for free anymore for people. But what I can do is like kind of grab a hold of it while I still have it and kind of uh, emboss it onto reality for people so they can feel the weight of of that realism and that part functions at an articulation for our human magnetism. Buddhist, Christian here, it functions in a weird Middle Eastern, Polak, English thing going apart, like all this nautical theme potentially as well. You know, it could build into this part of why I ended up being this like kind of like people pleaser too. Because if my people are supposed to serve and save people, it could have just like it could be built into a lot of people, especially at a coming of age, and it just gives this function to like human behavior that allows us to evolve in newer, brighter sort of like senses. So like back to like knowing you're white, but you might know white people, but you don't know white people, and it got you in trouble with this part on expert mode white people. And you should have it, but you kind of cut a few courses out so you could fit this weird part where Muslim fits into like this Hawaiian culture somehow, and you have this like hybrid of like Asian and Muslim and like kind of tribalism and all of this stuff mixing here with your family, knowing like it's gonna feel away, and it did, and they felt like it was obnoxious. But what was really obnoxious was knowing how heavy this truth was, and nobody gave it the time of day because they heard somebody say aliens are phony. Right. So that's kind of where if we have likened cousins of a different pejorative like thing going on, and it's more pronounced than other things, it could mean you function better with certain people on this planet in and outside of the oculus rate. So whether or not you can perceive, and that might be where we're starting to pick up more on what we can hear and how we can imagine and like project some of our fate in humanity before before it becomes a certain way, more Xerxes, more Neptune, like serious thing going on, or you end up with this part and clouds, and that's like a very big Greek thing. And Egyptians, they have the Romans, they have all the cloud gods and things like that from the sky, and that's where people it sheds light on the evil, and it becomes less of this like pointed thing and this big like ambiguous thing where it's like it turns this thing into a it's almost beautiful, right? A plague in itself is almost beautiful, and in humanity we often like marvel at like natural disasters and stuff, and that's because like we understand that and it does. It puts us at this fun part where life is bigger than us. So it's of course we trust it. We right. You see you see a tornado. You trust that thing is a tornado. And that's kind of like how we have become more. We're evolving towards some of this part of the visual acuity in and outside of what we can experience, like on and off, basically. So if you could experience more when you're dead too, which it leads to another weird, if you could experience more when you're dead, excuse me, that might be a huge reason why we haven't popped the bottle everywhere in America or in on the globe about life and death, and how it means it could mean that we're visited after we die and then articulated by things both on and off of this planet if we're evolving. Um, and that's one big reason we may never know the two ends of our cosmic kind of global positioning here in the galaxies on how this practitioner has actually started to overdevelop. And that's kind of how we could give we could give that bit 333 a.m. of synchronicity on what enigmatic technician gives on perfection, basically, because this is what people are looking for, and a lot of the Egyptians knew when a new crop of humans would be like becoming, how to articulate. Dude, they were all over the eugenics. Um, and so like that, those ones would be sharp this way, and they would all been taught standardized learning this way because that's how they were born in that year, and they had their own like way thing of like it wasn't just yearly, it was like anytime you had the same like concave in your nose as that guy, you would go directly to those people, um and that would catch you up to your enigmatic spiritual. And this is why I argue with my parents about civil rights and whether or not we got it wrong in my mom's side of her hillbilly culture for not letting more black people in and getting, because I've been able to look at hip hop and get from Lapeer to Chicago to like everything I've ever dreamed about Linkin Park and DJing and all this cool stuff that Asians are supposed to be like Waysend and stuff like that on this part where you're slung in on this Eastern philosophy tip that white people and black people like on the pipeline for that thing, and then articulate it. And that's why I get bullied, is because like black people feel like they've got Buddhism figured out, and white people feel like they've got Buddhism figured out. But Asian people feel like they've got Buddhism, you know what I mean? So like, but I'm in Michigan, and so where are all these Asian kids? Right. Well, they're right down the street technically. I, but like, I guess I'm not invited every time. Um, and so like, maybe I got my own problems just being away and looking away, and if I don't fit in, then of course trying to try to articulate myself with Asian people is different too. So like that's kind of that could be something if I'm supposed back to genetics. If I'm supposed to have a baby who's Asian, I would want to go marry an Asian woman or whatever. Not marry, but you get what I say. I would pair off with an Asian person. I would have a result as a more Asian affluent child. And that's kind of where the evolutionary trait would dictate on this Xerxes kind of nepotism on even in your like the measurements of like your all sorts of small detail, your eyebrows, your like how your tragus and your conch fit together, like very particular increments on human measurements would be made, so that way people can give their height, their edge in human development and evolution, so people aren't getting watered down, because they would have there's stories like that where in history where where villages and families get watered down, and they stop producing the same types of offspring, and it's led to caustic events in human development where out you start getting more regular. I mean, that's kind of how human diseases also can occur, is like if humans become more variant towards this susceptibility of certain diseases, um, those diseases will mutate and find their way to those humans. So there's a good chance that like that's kind of happening on this planet, and we're starting to feel the kind of roll ahead around that in science, and especially since COVID. We are now seeing which humans are more susceptible in fighting off the hereditary like infections, than others, because it does seem to affect our RNA, slightly once, as we like articulate it, and we beat things, right, and it it helps. Some people beat it with, some people beat it without, but like it did test a lot of humans, okay? With vaccines, without, it has been testing humanity and people. It's killing people. So again, to back off some of that part here, we evolve, and we're currently using it as a tool to evolve our own cardiovascular, immune systems, all sorts of things. And like it gives flavor to our dexterity on what we feel like we can accomplish while we still have the daylight to observe it, because that's the next thing. At some point, these things should be recognized to be like phased out and ready for the next staging of what's going to be the test of killing off humanity and survival, so we can also then articulate our stoicness to achieve it. And it replicates and mirrors backwards onto our present before it even happens. So like if humanity has this part of coalescing time, basically you're dilating time because you've passed this part where you're no longer sleeping, you're wide awake, and you're acting as you like would in a lucid dream, but it's reality. And it's kind of how it's happening with people, giving them this partitioner work on knowing that you'll have it when you need to go back to the dreamland, and tucking it away as you wake up and you have to go live your daily life. So this bothered people, right? And seeing that this didn't give you as much life here. And we don't like that because you are have great this. It happens all the time in humanity. But that's kind of maybe how we've been able to backpedal on brakes, or the brakes on a little bit, get a little, oh, I did see that coming type experience with humanity, while we still, and it's giving us like weird retroactivity, where we're like pushing something forward, and it over our heads back into like our present moment. And somehow some people might get caught up in like this like part where you can't focus on it. It becomes this back to the individual, where it feels more like neuropathy, and you have like neuroses that keep you preoccupied with OCD, things like OCD, and like, preconceived like pickiness, right? You get real picky with certain things. And that's one big reason why you kind of have to look at, no, don't need to get picky here. Nature already has you figured out. And in fact, the pickier you get, the worse you're going to make it for the rest of the community, who's attempting to evolve alongside you to put you on the next one over there. And that's kind of where people don't know how to chillax. People don't know how to chill. I tried to tell my parents that a long time ago, over the past like 20 years. People don't know how to chill. So like once I'm learning how to find people who know how to chill out, and they know when to relax and stuff, that they have this part figured out. And these kids, I was worried they didn't know how to relax and stuff. So I never cut them in, which is why I got cut out completely. But that shows you that I was right too, and that these kids kept fighting me, and they did not want to chill. And so I didn't give them anything, and that's why they ended up with kind of all this at the with the waysides that I didn't know if it was going to be back or front. I'm sorting things out before they happen, because I see this thing is going down, and I jump to the freaking forefront of it, and it's like I pancake this thing out front, flash it in daylight, and make sure everybody who was a part of it gets theirs, and I make sure I'm in and out, I'm in and out, and before you know it, I've already gotten mine. I'm like, but I'm still going through this weird next part. I'm still going through this thing. And it like gives you this thing where like you have that going on now along like with you, but it stacks backwards and it kind of pushes you on your next decision. So this part of compartmentalizing for human cognizance and neuropathy gives this part on recognition. It's high, it's forefront on whatever part of the pineal gland has been able to access my sacral chakra can have me experience my current reality through that color basically. So like if I'm all of a sudden everything's like orange, I have to be like I have to look at like things from those colors and stuff like that. So if people have figured out how to shine light, basically light energy through people, and they can figure people out like that, then it makes sense that people just have me figured out but they don't like the way they figured it out because they peaked at the presence too soon, and now they lived a lot of things that they could have done before this. But that's because they knew this thing would happen for their people if they did. And so that's why they do that. And so it's confusing. It's really hard, but there's a lot of this going on and perpendicular clashing and signal processing that gets flushed out by these pressure fronts basically and static. And it's like this big, quick jolt between this. It's like a bigger system that functions much like our brain, but it exists outside of us, and we are affected. We are like we're like little nerve cells almost and we experience this part of the planet for the planet, and that's kind of how um, humanity has basically given itself purpose by checking in on the rifting in forward, backward, enigmatic technician on a time-based riffing. So like that's kind of alien. That's how I got here. It's like these aliens showed me high on acid how slow they maneuver time while I'm as like particle like dust clouds here. And like I've seen them in like rays of light in the afternoon, especially my buddies and I were like sitting in the room one night, one afternoon, and like we were tripping and these things were like in my basement. And I was like and we were just like talking and like chilling and these things were like checking us out. So like that's kind of like something that like will stick with me here as I move forward through some of this alien stuff is like once you get pa- past this part in your recognition for lucid dreaming, you can basically connect with life that has a difference in escape for humanity. So this is why like humanity can handle itself, but it's got to be ready for this jolt of big, larger than life enigmatics because we're no longer the key players in our reality on Earth. Um, that's for these things, weirdly, and that's kind of why people are getting like boxed in different ways. Is like humanity, dude. Humanity is like we make too much of a big deal between humans because these things are much different than humans, and they take up a lot more property. So that's kind of why we're support in that sense. Um, when you're gifted stuff, we're supposed to articulate it. And that's kind of like what the idea is here is like the aliens are gifting us stuff to articulate because they know what's next, and that might not be human. So that's kind of why they're looking at Thrifty Difty, like dumping off humans and taking all of our like life presence and repurpose it on new life on this planet. So it could take some time, but like as we go, we're gonna find out that there's a lot of like ebb and flow to this part of the conversation on what we can and can't achieve already with like the time that we have available to us and the tools that we will basically learn and build in the forefront of what we know to will need to be measured basically and utilized to cut and achieve and edit and draw and base and stage and frame and all these other good things, but like it looks like it appears to us in daylight, um very regularly is where we can see that at dusk is where we can see some of this stuff play out, but very often it'll surface in different ways, um all over the world, and especially once you have like northern lights, stars, shooting stars, satellites and comets and stuff like that. These things will pop out at you, and they have been known to do that. And there's full on video of latent UFOs. So if our enigmatic chakras are at the same frequency of some of these non-human piloted spacecrafts off planet, mind you, these things come from out of nowhere. And then by the time we have a good glimpse of it, it does its thing and then it's off, uh, more often than not. And there's your enigmatic technician, and your draw box. It draws this part of your enigmatic, and it purposes it to whatever the heck is supposed to be here next. And that's what we have for an explanation as for right now on how, who, what, when, where, why. Because there, it does seem to choose people that have more vetted enigmatic technician and telepathy, that are ready to see some messed up stuff, basically. And it's identify leaves it, you identify yourself with it eventually. You don't have to, but I mean, it feels like it's left a piece of itself on you, and you can feel it. You give it new meaning to as it goes, and that's why you end it on on the ways that it's supposed to feel seamless and flawless. And we're starting to look at the possibilities that there are achievable patterns in humanity through the mainframe of society, which is why we're constantly kind of procreating and recreating old opportunities for humanity to like grotesquely like oblige in the amount of like fortitude we put through the strength of those goals. So once you succeed, it like it acclimates and accumulates all this stuff. Probably more summed here, but yeah, it does balance things out once and it's big, and now everything has its own like gravity around it. And that's kind of what humans are possibly looking at in our own human evolutionary process alongside of whatever the heck is going on here with these like non-human things. So like 353 in back to synchronicities. If humans are like enigmatically plugged in to the outside of like reality, and all we can see in front of us is reality, but we feel it, the future, then it's part of like our evolution to try and like pull from the future to incorporate into our now, very similarly as you would pull like the past into to learn about the present. It kind of has this that part to it where we're no longer just guessing, but like it gives us a strange gift, it seems like, or a handout, a small sliver of a possibility of like endless amounts of like kind of conjecture and trajectory on your hereditary kind of enigmatic technicians and your root placing and all sorts of things. So follow your roots. You'll never know where they'll lead you to, and it's all the more reason to look at how far away from your roots did you fall, because there's a good chance that you're on to the next length of that enigmatic technician and divine coursing through your evolution. So get on that kind of stuff and do your best at whatever it is you're trying to achieve at in life, because there's a good chance that it was handed down to you in some weird facet by this part of our dreams and our daily droll and waking life society. Um, and that's like the part of Buddhism that I really felt like really strongly connected to when I was getting in contact with some of these otherworldly terrestrials, and this crypto life that we're kind of looking at, the multiple dimensions and things that we have available now in theory, in ways that we've never tried to, and now it's obvious uh, how to the puzzle pieces are here. We just need to start piecing them together to find the right, like, you know picture, and then we have a nice cohesive source of variety and all sorts of other things that we might not we may or may not have overlooked in past parts of humanity, dude. So like, again, future is endless as this hodgepodge of people and answers and trying new things out. We are still very naive in humanity and our evolutionary development. So keep an eye out on where the helm is held and who's cutting out in front of the picture here. Because it could mean that there's a next sign or another leg of humanity yet to be grown, or achieved or lived. You never know. Get stepped on. Uh, might not grow back this time, but hey, that's the piece for right now. It's 3:57 a.m. I've had fun on this stream. This has been a long 2-hour stream, but yeah, this is the sauce, guys. This is why the enigmatic technician for Roman numerologies and other neat Catholic, even the Catholic Pope's like, yeah, aliens come in and out of the Vatican, right? Who knew? And so, so like that's like a big deal now, and everybody's looking at the world a little bit different glasses on these days. It's pretty much more than the people probably could have speculated on where some of that ends, and good food for thought, great banter on giving people tools that they could utilize in their own personal lives and perception on reality, because Lord knows that there is a lot to be stressed out about. And if we can figure out how to give leisure to the things and grease the gears and things, it gives people um, you know, a little less friction, a little easier time on going. And that's that's probably the best thing we can do for humanity here. Um, yeah, but that being said, I'd just like to say thank you guys for tuning in today. It's been a blast here talking about this live stream for the past 2 hours here. I'm glad whoever put me up to this let me go off on this because this is kind of a fun one, and hopefully it's a nice layaway from our hey blame the KKK um, daily cold case. The pervert murderer will be back to pervert murderer very soon. Um, I am going to have to go into all sorts of strange things there, perhaps later in the morning here. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and end you guys here off on a